again, you're putting concepts out there that state parks will gladly take a look at them, whether we can eventually put something out there on the beach, you know, like a composting type of a toilet, Dave, as opposed to chemies. I mean, you know, in the long run, can state parks manage it and operate it as opposed to what we've got there presently? So we're exploring ideas.
We create multiple number of physical models, which for people that have, you know, experienced the site, you know, from the trail side, but can't necessarily visualize it from the more macro perspective, as well as being able to compare these entries side by side. These physical models are going to be a very useful tool.
When you say physical models, do you mean like a site model that shows the procession from the parking all the way down to the beach?
Yeah, I believe last week we sent out the requirements for, one was a site model, and secondly is a zoomed in model of the option of either a trail section and more focused components and or the crossing, and that's highlighted in the model document.
For the zoom option, the dimensions are rather.
Did they send a topo?
Is it possible to expand that? Because I was thinking about some of the other entries, and for the straight one, it's perfect. But a lot of the other ones have either curves or they bend in specific sections, and those dimensions are very kind of restrictive in terms of displaying the design in an optimal way. So, is it possible to? I just don't understand why it needs to be so
Sure.
cropped.
So the goal with the sizing of the smaller model is actually it's a carry-on dimension for an airplane.
That's a huge model.
Whether or not you are able to, you know, have it fold open so it's twice as big, or you have two of those side by side. The goal is it's important to have the site model at a certain scale. But for the detailed one, we're trying to give it a certain container dimension. So we ask that you keep it within those dimensions, whether it expands in itself to become larger or it has multiple pieces. That could work. Does that seem like up for discussion? Of course, we want to make sure that we're giving you the right framework to really display the designs well. So if you explore it more and it becomes it still isn't working out, let us know and we can keep it as a discussion. Fortunately we're a small enough group now where we can make sure that the requirements are meeting the needs.
Did you supply a topo map to the firms?
We did, yes.
Okay.
And again, we just a comment on the topo map. We looked into having an additional survey done. State Parks is already contracted to have that done. It's underway currently, and we decided that we'd rather invest the resources into the competition now and wait for that resource, which is already underway, to come at the end of the year. So we provided you with some basic topography, and that combined with your visits to the site should be enough to get this design to enough of a level detail where it's feasible and it can be really carried out.
Michael?
Yeah.
I think I want to just clarify something too, that what State Parks has done, we've got a contract with a biologic contractor to look at 8 different pieces of the Trestles, and it's really more biologic. There's some visitor impacts, assessment, kind of what it's been, a data research on biology and visitation, and go to the the background cultural resources found on the foundation site, just things like that. We have not asked for a topographic. We look for hydrology. We look for a remapping of vegetation. Just they're going to fly it and then ground truth it, give you a species list of everything you find, and then what habitats are there. But we never ask for, and I think that's what you're alluding to, is micro habitat. And what you get out of topo maps is kind of the 80-foot contours or something like that, and it really doesn't work for you when you're designing grade and drawing. So
You kind of need a
That's a great-
topo map
good
to make
clarification.
to do a model like that. That's the only reason I bring it up.
Definitely. And so have you found the one that we provided, is it to enough detail or?
I haven't seen it. 'cause
It's always better if
More
it has
better.
more resolution. I mean,
Yeah.
it just allows us to work at a, more refined.
It's 5-foot
level.
contours, I think, right? Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. It's
That's okay.
better than the previous one, but it's, I mean, ideally, to be accurate, it would be the 1-foot contours.
That's
Sort of-
the
it's
the
better.
one we had was 2-foot contours.
Yeah, the previous one.
We purchased topography, the first round that had 2-foot contours.
Okay.
But I'm not sure that, when we overlaid it on the aerial, it seemed to have issues as well.
I had big issues,
It
yeah.
had big issues. It didn't quite correspond, although it had more accuracy, although we questioned it, so.
I think one of the first things we're gonna do is overlay this on the aerial and go outside and walk it. I mean, the biggest thing that was apparent was, the upper portion at 75-foot elevation or 67, whatever it is, was just rolling over the corner.
The bluff area
Yeah.
was wrong.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, it seemed like all the maps that I had and the photos, and I was trying to do a lot of interpolation work, and none of them really coincided very well. So,
yeah, a survey of the trail would be great to have. We'd be able to make the solutions more accurate, for sure. That's the one thing.
Yes, if you surveyed the center line, the existing trail, that
Yeah.
that would give us
yeah.
some accuracy in terms of top and bottom. And
I mean, it wouldn't be expensive.
well, also,
$5,000.
if everyone had the same accurate topo information, then you'd be able to compare apples and apples. I
Yeah.
mean, for my team, which is in New York, I mean, yeah, I can drive down here and take a look for them, but it's a little difficult, and I'm sure you're representing probably somebody from Germany or whatever. It's a little difficult for them to know kind of like the nuances, so all they're going to be able to go by is whatever graphic information that you give us. So and you're just bringing up the issue that when you overlay the topo that you were given with, was it Google Maps or something wasn't quite corresponding, but some of us may not know that if we're not, physically that close to the site.
Especially.
So that's going to result in, say, different base site models that may look different. You're going to go, why is this guy stupid?
Well, especially if we're trying to use the trail, if we're trying to get back to the natural condition.
Right.
All the models that we had, that we were looking at, it was really, it just didn't work because it was too steep. But we know that those topo lines were maybe 10 or 15 feet in a different location in reality. So, I mean, just a couple shots of it on the trail would be hugely helpful.
We'll look into it.
We can recommend local engineers too.
Of course, that'd be very helpful, and especially,
Yeah.
we did look around and we got some quotes from 7 to 10 grand, and
Yeah.
which is it's also we're not sure we have the resources for it. So if you could recommend local resources, and perhaps we could work with them, understanding the nature of the competition to.
yeah, if we could figure out sort of what was sort of the most critical minimum amount of information
Yeah.
that would serve all of us, then that would probably reduce your costs as well.
I had another question. For the actual deliverable product, the book and presentation boards, what's the goal, I think, from maybe Steve, from your perspective or whoever's perspective, to try to take that piece and use it for something at the next step? Is it to go out and seek grant funding, or is it to show to agencies, or what is the ultimate goal of the final deliverables for this piece?
If I could bring it down to its essence, we are searching for concepts that could work if we can get all of the approvals. And State Parks has that long list of people, starting with the landlord, that we need to be able to market this to. So the end game, what we have begun is dialogue that presents us with workable solutions, very, very workable solutions. I think what we come up with out of the final 5 here, and the actual process. Rich and I have talked about it, and Dave, there are 2 components here. They're actually separate components. So one is a railroad crossing issue, and the other is a trail within the state park that may or may not have to be ADA. Again, it's at a parking lot that is only open temporarily, so it probably does not require ADA, designated parking. All the components that we talked about out there on the ground. This has been again, Catherine and I, all the way back to with the city, examining their problems, and this is a contiguous problem that was left for a future date, and this is the catalyst for hopefully achieving a result that will require extensive work with all of the other stakeholders and finding a grant funding source. Because again, truly, state parks, the little bit of money that we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave or Rich, but it's all portioned out from the bond, the last bond money. There's no money to do anything with this internally, but raising awareness from the management standpoint. Rich and I both shared that same problem. We have a safety concern down there. We have a trust while we're trying to steer people in a different direction. They're not going to go anyplace else. The Marines couldn't stop the surfers from going through there when they had multiple trails through there. We could lay concertina wire across there right now and it would be gone tomorrow. And again, just being good stewards and being responsible to take action. We're delighted that the other stakeholders, got coming in through Nike 6.0 and Hurley, saying, hey, we can lend some energy to this and at least start asking the questions and even help create a process that will come up with solutions. When you have something that you could show to the world, that, okay, here's the problem and here's the fix, and what would be the best fix for that place? We're going to have a pretty good selection of the brightest minds in the world working on it. They're all here.
So the presentation model and book, this is kind of piggybacking on his question, you said was to raise awareness of the issue. So it's sort of to sell this idea to those outside this group, like people who could possibly fund it, or is that kind of like to convince other stakeholders that, yeah, this is how we should go, or whatever? Because the question in the back of my mind that I want to ask is, are you hoping to give this to, say, they call them surveyors in the UK, a cost consultant, to get an idea about how much it would cost?
That would be one of the steps on down the line. I think again, when we have a tangible and we can now present it, the users are the surfers. There are vehicles whereby we can communicate to them that right now they feel threatened. They feel that, one, we're going to destroy somehow the ambiance of the experience, and we're going to bring more people here. And if, in the end, the question came up out there, is this going to bring more people? There are a finite number of parking places, there are only so many access points, and people are crossing the track regardless. A crossing has to be developed, or we have to stop the people from going there. And how can we make the trail safer so that the mom, and there are moms that do push their little baby strollers down that thing, and people dragging coolers behind them and the likes of that. There are families that do use it. Will more people come? Again, I've already seen capacity. We know what happens when the surf is at its epic state. It only happens maybe 4 or 5 times out of the year. Might there be a slight residual increase? I don't know. Surfing popularity ebbs and flows. So back to using it to sell to a potential funder, also for state parks to be able to carry this on up to the higher levels of division and the director, and being able to show some tangible idea as opposed to just what we've had to this point, which are position papers and the statement of, we have a need here, but in a grand scheme